So we just experienced a wave of inflation. The common narrative is, oh, it was transitory, inflation's coming down, everything's okay. Inflation is coming back. I believe, and I think Mike believes, we are headed for a much larger inflation, and that's going to translate into a lot of people trying to protect their purchasing power by moving into gold and silver. And that's going to happen even if this statutory price increase doesn't happen. Hey, Gold Silver family, Alan Hibbert here with another video, and I actually want to continue what we talked about in our last video, the possibility of the Treasury revaluing gold to $20,000 per ounce. That's the statutory price, not the market price, because you guys had so many great comments below that video, and I want to take a look at them. Some of you had questions. Some of you said you don't understand certain things. Some of you said you're confused, or even that the video runs counter to Mike's entire thesis, doesn't it? As described in his first book. Certain people thought that the analysis didn't take into account certain factors or assumptions. So I want to take the time to address those. I pulled out maybe 10 or 12 of your comments, and I want to go through them one at a time throughout the video and make sure we're all on the same page. So for those of you who didn't see part one, it looks like this. $20,000 gold is a Treasury revaluation possible. That was from last week. So I would encourage you to go watch that first, just so you know what we're talking about. And as a reminder for folks who did watch that video, it all came from a tweet from Luke Groman, where he talked about how the US Treasury can get the debt to GDP ratio down to a reasonable level by revaluing physical gold from its current price of roughly $2,000 to roughly $20,000. So a factor of 10 times higher. So we basically did some basic math about what Luke talked about, and then we had some implications for the purchasing power of people in the United States and abroad who own gold and who don't, and who own treasuries and who don't. And one of the comments that came out of this was, I'm confused. Why does someone with gold who lives abroad get 10 times purchasing power in the US versus someone with gold who lives in the US? And this is a really good question. So if you own gold anywhere in the world, why would your purchasing power be different? And it wouldn't. This is actually a mistake that I made, and I'm really sorry for this. And a few of you caught on to it. And actually, it affects not just that one part of our analysis, but 4 parts of our analysis. I was doing a lot of this in my head, kind of the way Luke was talking off the cuff and doing round numbers in his head, and he made a few math mistakes. I was doing this in my head. I made a few mistakes, and at the last minute before the video, I thought you guys needed a visual, so I typed all this out. I went a little too fast, and what I did, I was off by a factor of 10 in each of these yellow cells because I was multiplying the exchange rate by a factor of 10 and the price of gold by a factor of 10, and then prices in the United States by a factor of 10. And I just did one too many multiples of 10, and I got it wrong. So actually this should say, let's correct it together. Same purchasing power, same purchasing power, 90% less purchasing power, same purchasing power. Okay. So then what actually, I think this becomes easier to understand, and it's more accurate, of course. But what's interesting here is that everybody has the same purchasing power unless you hold dollars or treasuries. And that was kind of the point of the analysis. And I'm so surprised I didn't catch that before making the video. So yeah, if you have dollars or treasuries, you're the ones who are going to lose. Right? And it doesn't matter if you're in the United States or abroad. If you have dollars or treasuries, you're going to lose. Whereas anyone who doesn't have those things isn't really going to see a change. And that's in the simplified analysis. We'll get to more in just a minute. Another question here. I don't understand why you assume that if gold is written up in dollars, it wouldn't affect the rest of the world's currencies as well. Napkin math. Yeah, we are doing napkin math, but that's intentional. It's just to understand the basics. So if gold is written up in dollars, would it affect the other currencies as well? Basically, what would change in a very simplified sense is that gold would still have the same price in every other fiat currency. It's just that the exchange rate between the dollar and each foreign currency would adjust by a factor of 10 in this case. So for example, if you say that roughly $5 is equal to 100 Mexican pesos, okay, roughly 20 to 1, after this scenario we're talking about, approximately you would need $50 to equal 100 Mexican pesos. It would just go up by a factor of 10. And that type of move would happen between every two pair of fiat currencies, or it would happen between the dollar and every other fiat currency that it floats against. Approximately. But again, these aren't exact numbers. And that's something else that you guys said, which we will get to. So one of the biggest assumptions here I want to explain is that this analysis is done ceteris paribus, meaning all else equal. So all else equal. So we hold everything else equal. We hold the supply and the demand of everything else equal just to understand the analysis. But in practice, ceteris is never paribus, right? The rest is never equal. Things are always going to change as a result. So this is just a starting point. But so many of you kind of expressed a desire to go beyond and really think through the implications of what would be different. And so that's what we're going to do. So James here says, the one part of this thesis is that all prices will be affected by the dollar devaluation of gold the same percentage as the devaluation of gold. Historically, that scenario has never occurred in that way. And you're absolutely right, by the way. Prices of different items and assets have changed by different amounts. There are numerous recent examples of countries doing currency devaluations that have not had all prices affected the way described by the thesis. Or please correct me. Thank you. James, you're absolutely right. You're spot on. I wanted to start with a super simple analysis so we could understand what's going on. And so many of you want to go deeper. So yeah, let's do that. And a clarification here, if that happens, right, if everything is held equal and everything moves just by a factor of 10, does that mean $50 per loaf of bread or gallon of gas? Well, if you're currently spending $5 for a loaf of bread or a gallon of gas, if all else is equal and this type of thing happened, yes, it would go up by a factor of 10 and it would be $50 for a loaf of bread or a gallon of gas. That is what that would mean. However, to James's point here, it might not be that simple, or guaranteed it won't be that simple. It could go up even higher. It could go up lower. It will be different depending on each type of asset. Another question here. So what you're saying is the revaluation of gold to 20,000 is a veiled devaluation of the dollar? Yes, exactly. That's the only thing that could possibly happen. So a government can only control its own currency. It can't tell you what gold is or what it's worth. It can only talk about its own currency and its promises to pay currency, which are bonds. So a big important concept to remember here is a change in the statutory price of gold does not change what gold is or how highly gold is valued. And therefore, it doesn't immediately change gold's purchasing power. Okay, we'll get to gold's purchasing power in a minute. A statutory change in price only changes the value of the fiat currency that this particular government controls. So in the case of the US Treasury, it can change the value of the US dollar by dropping it, but it can't affect foreign currencies. It can't affect gold. It can't affect how many loaves of bread are out there. So that's the only thing it can do. So really what you got here, per 8 dude, 781, that's exactly right? It's just a devaluation of the dollar. Pete James says, if gold gets reset to $20,000 per ounce and gold holders don't get rich, then what happens to those that have no gold? They obviously get totally wiped out. Gold holders will maintain their standard of living. They will afford housing, food, bills, etc. Those that have zero gold and only cash will become homeless and lose everything. Okay, so some people probably will become homeless and lose everything. Others, not so much. But in general, yeah, you're right. In general, you're absolutely right here. So if you're just sitting on government fiat, it doesn't really matter which government it is, you're exposing yourself to this kind of risk. And as more and more people figure it out and trade their fiat for gold, they prevent themselves from suffering this kind of fate. Pretty simple thesis. Chris K says, thanks, Alan, but there is a break in your logic. If no gold holders lose 90% of their purchasing power and gold holders' purchasing power has not changed, then where was the lost 90% purchasing power been transferred? Where did it go? It's a great question. It must have gone somewhere, as wealth is never burned, but merely transferred. I think you are a student of Hidden Secrets of Money. I believe it goes to the gold holders. You should really think this through before making bold statements like this. Think of it also like this. If you own gold, you are like your own central bank. If there is an accounting adjustment on the price and the Fed benefits, then all gold holders should benefit, not just the Fed. Well, I like that you're thinking about this. Like, where did the purchasing power go? So if we go back to the implications here, and anyone holding dollars or treasuries loses 90% of their purchasing power, and everyone else stays the same, where did the purchasing power go? Well, the answer is it went to the Treasury, and that's why they would do this. So the Treasury could sort of magically conjure up out of thin air $5 trillion. That's something we talked about in the last video, approximately $5 trillion. And in order to conjure it up out of thin air, they're really stealing that purchasing power from people who have earned it, people who are currently holding it. So that is what happens in the transfer. All the people holding dollars and treasuries transfer their purchasing power to the Treasury with the stroke of a pen. So again, if you don't want to expose yourself to that kind of risk, hold something that they can't control. All right. Yes. Another concept here. Anybody who's holding gold and has mortgage debt would definitely make out big. For that matter, anybody who has gold and has any types of debt denominated in US dollars would benefit severely. Severely in a good way, I think. Yes, exactly. So now we're taking the analysis further. The thing you're missing, if gold gets revalued and the dollar goes down, is people who have debt denominated in dollars that own gold will be able to sell some of that gold at a substantially higher price to raise dollars to pay off their debt. For instance, if you have a $500,000 mortgage and own gold, you can sell that gold at a much higher price to get dollars to pay off that mortgage. Those people would benefit greatly. True, correct. You guys are totally on the money here, no pun intended. When a fiat currency is devalued, all debts denominated in that fiat currency become easier to repay. They're slightly easier to repay for fiat holders, and they're significantly easier to pay for gold holders. And you're absolutely right. If the price of gold went up 10x, you could sell an ounce of gold, for example, and get 10 times the amount of fiat that you otherwise would have. And then you can pay off your own debts, your own dollar-denominated debts, 10 times easier. So absolutely, this is an important thing. Yes, no doubt about it. Going another step further, I do not believe this analysis takes into account the falling demand and hence price for existing assets priced in dollars that become available in a fire sale that no one but a gold holder could purchase. So not all assets would go up 10x. Most would fall greatly priced in dollars because no one with dollars could afford to buy assets that jump 10x in price while the amount of dollars they hold remains the same, right? Essentially, yeah, you're right. You're right that this analysis did not take that into account, and that was intentional, right? Purposely, we started simple. But yes, Rob, Humphrey, you and many others, at least 38 people who liked your comment, were thinking along the same lines. And I love that you guys were thinking this way, and I love that you spoke up about it. So yeah, this analysis did not take into account the falling demand and the fact that different assets would move at different levels. So here, this brings up a really good point because a lot of people were upset thinking that they couldn't increase their purchasing power by holding gold. All they could do was keep it the same. And here's what I'll say is this, concept number 4, under normal circumstances, and by the way, that's what I mean, like every day is normal circumstances, okay? Every day is normal circumstances. This hypothetical situation that might only take a day or a week or a month, those would be special circumstances, okay? But under normal circumstances, almost every day, all the time, gold holders increase their purchasing power because of the changes in relative preferences expressed by everyone in the economy. And that's about all different assets. They have preferences of, should I produce more bread or should I buy more bread or should I, produce more houses or whatever. All these different preferences, all the different technologies that lower the cost of producing things, all the different things that change generally contribute to the purchasing power of gold going up. Basically, the short version is it's easier to produce stuff than it is to produce gold. That's kind of the short version. Like, the reason that gold's purchasing power tends to go up is because it's harder to make a new unit of gold than it is to make a new unit of just about anything else. Bread, whatever, anything. So in general, that is the trend. TZGZZ says, this video runs counter to Mike Maloney's entire thesis, doesn't it? As described in his book, Investing in Gold and Silver. I don't believe it does. I think it's completely consistent with Mike's thesis. What I would reiterate is that the scenario we're talking about here, about a statutory revaluation, is a special circumstance that only would take place over the course of a day, a week, a month. It's a really tight window of time. However, in general, what I just said here, under normal circumstances, gold holders increase their purchasing power because of the changes in relative preferences expressed by everyone in the economy. And to your point, to Mike's point, generally, day by day, people are slowly figuring out that holding fiat paper is not a good idea and holding gold is a good idea. So slowly over time, people are moving their purchasing power, moving their capital into precious metals. And actually, this reminded me of something that I wanted to share with you guys. It's a chart that I just saw in a Twitter thread from Tavi Costa, and he presented the 3 inflationary waves of the 1970s. He basically shows that there's 3 waves of inflation. This first one peaking at about 6%, and then about 12%, and then over 14%. And this happened throughout a period of 10 or 11 years, basically the 1970s. And viewers of this channel will know that the 1970s was a massive bull market for precious metals. The price of gold went up roughly 25 times, price of silver almost 50 times, I think 49 times. So tremendous bull market. And Tavi says, you are here, right? So we just experienced a wave of inflation, and the common narrative is, oh, it was transitory, inflation's coming down, everything's okay. And part of Tavi's point and my point and Mike's point, okay, is that inflation is coming back. So when you do just create a whole bunch of currency out of thin air, it has to show up in asset prices. It has to go somewhere. So I believe, and I think Mike believes, we are headed for a much larger inflation. And that's going to translate into a lot of people trying to protect their purchasing power by moving into gold and silver. And that's going to happen even if this statutory price increase doesn't happen. In fact, I don't think it's likely for a statutory price increase to happen. It was just a scenario that was interesting to think through and share with you guys. But that's I think an unlikely thing. The more common thing, the thing that I'm essentially betting on, is that day by day by day, people are going to start moving into precious metals, and eventually we're going to see massive, massive run-ups. And I think that is completely consistent with Mike's first book and his second book and just about anything he's ever said. So I'll leave it there. Thank you so much. I appreciate it, guys. Thank you again for all the comments. You guys were wonderful. And thank you for watching. I will see you in the next video.